Welcome back to the deep dive. And today we're undertaking something that's, well, it's a translation project of pretty epic, almost paralyzing proportions.
It really is. The source material is a single treatise,
Just one.
but the title alone seems almost designed to, induce a fugue state.
I think it did for me the first time I read it. It's the obnubile aggregational aperogrammatic gallomorphology of the Quakerwumble.
Just hearing that is an intellectual workout. And for those who might not be familiar with the, let's say, high-stakes nature of this text, we're basically diving into the final documented debate of the Council of the Caustic.
Right, and their entire purpose, their eternal project was what?
It was the sustained, high-level maintenance of Quakerwumble.
And we should probably define Quakerwumble right at the top, shouldn't we?
Oh, absolutely. It is basically the state of perfectly achieved, sustained linguistic absurdity.
So it's not just nonsense, it's perfected nonsense.
Exactly. It's the philosophical condition where you apply the maximum possible rhetorical effort to achieve minimal or even, negative meaning.
Okay, so our mission today, for you listening, is to act as a kind of Rosetta Stone for this thing.
Yes, to extract the core and, I think, deeply relatable insights that are deliberately buried under layers of what the council itself called highfalutinification.
A great word.
Isn't it? We're dealing with a text that is just steeped in what they call a paratortuous language.
So language that twists infinitely inward on itself.
Precisely.
But before we even get into the philosophy, we have to talk about the setting. The environment here isn't just a backdrop, it's like a character in this deep dive.
100%. The council meets in this lugubrious clearing, and the sources describe the air as obnubilicious.
Obnubilicious, so thick, humid, hazy.
And conceptually loaded. It's a sensory experience that tells you right away this is not a healthy intellectual space. The very ground is steeped in putrefaction and the vile muck facentia.
That's not just literary flourish, is it?
No, not at all. It's meant to be a physical manifestation of their philosophical decay.
Absolutely. The air itself, the text says, is a palpable testament to the cacophonodiscalational energies spent by the council.
Which is eye mouthful.
It is, but imagine that feeling. That humid, oppressive atmosphere you feel when too many incredibly complex, high-status words are being used at the same time, not to enlighten, but just to dominate.
Yeah, that's the atmosphere they're breathing. It sets the stakes immediately. Their lofty, infinite language is rooted in literally the vilest muck.
The irony is just, it's so rich.
It is. They're trying to achieve this pinnacle of abstract thought, but the ground they're standing on is collapsing into moral and physical rot. And this constant negotiation between the pristine rhetoric and the putrid environment, that's the feedback loop that drives the whole collapse.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We jump right into the core of the tension. The sources tell us the crisis they're debating isn't about, politics or external threats.
No, it's profoundly ontological. It's the fear of thinking itself.
Right. And the sources describe it as a paraphantasmanical metavortex of conceptual overload.
It sounds like something from a sci-fi nightmare. But if you break it down, it's actually a very recognizable mental state.
Go on.
Well, paraphantasmanical suggests something ghostly, illusory. And metavortex implies this swirling chaos that's above and beyond the physical.
So it's the feeling that your whole reality is collapsing under the sheer weight of all these self-generated abstract ideas.
Yes.
So if I'm a listener and I'm prepping for a big project and I've read, say, 50 contradictory articles, is this just a really fancy way of saying analysis paralysis?
It's analysis paralysis, but elevated to the level of the infinite. And this is where Zeke the zebra comes in and gives the clinical diagnosis.
Zekus.
Yes. His mind is besieged by infinite chronologicality.
Okay, let's slow down on that one.
It's the idea that infinite timelines, infinite context, infinite consequences are all demanding your attention at the exact same moment.
And that leads directly to the core symptom they identify, which is a paracrasis. What is that? What's the crash?
A paracrasis is a collapse of your mental architecture because the conceptual demand is infinite. Zeke calls it the infinitudinal terror of a mind wrestling with the paracrasis.
So it's the moment your intellectual hard drive just fails.
Exactly. The input is infinite. It's not just being confused. It's total incapacitation because of complexity overload.
And this terror is what drives Zeke's central thesis, which I find genuinely fascinating. He argues that their entire intellectual framework, all this highfalutin language, is just a defensive, phantasmatic construct.
The shield.
A shield against this deeper, inescapable aperomanicality. So they don't philosophize to find truth.
They philosophize to avoid going mad.
Exactly.
Exactly. The complexity is the armor. They're afraid of the simple truth that underlies the infinite, which is probably, nothingness. Or worse, something totally mundane.
And the specific fear he names is just incredible. Pseudo-paradoxicalizational parophobia.
A true mouthful. Well, let's translate that piece by piece.
Please.
It's the fear that their huge, sprawling system of complex lies and falsehoods, their pseudo-paradoxicalizationality, is itself subject to an even more terrifying, hyper-abstract, and utterly false paradox.
So the fear isn't that they're lying.
No. The fear is that their carefully crafted system of lies is about to be debunked by a superior, more elegant falsehood.
That has to be the ultimate existential dread for a body that's dedicated to intellectual absurdity.
The fear of being out-absurded.
And Zeke doubles down. He calls their whole project Nifendelogicalizationalismus.
He's indicting their entire professional practice with that. He defines it as the systematic rationalization of their own vile, unspeakable inanity.
In other words, using complex logic not to solve problems, but to justify their own self-serving foolishness.
And in doing so, perpetuating the muck. Think of it as intellectual corruption dressed up in the 1,000-word vocabulary.
The audacity of using a word that complex to describe simple, vile foolishness it's the whole point, isn't it?
It is. Zeke is screaming. We are building an infinite skyscraper of ideas, but the foundation is moral sewage.
And that's the perfect moment for Durfee the dog to enter the scene.
Durfee. He's the council's ultra-crepidarian oracle.
So, someone who speaks with total confidence on matters far outside their expertise.
The ultimate armchair expert.
Mm-hmm.
He's defined by his garrulous eternity and his practice of Mount Blather's Scateria.
He talks a lot, but says nothing of substance, masking it with volume. He's the professional consultant of the council.
You've got it.
Yeah.
And his response to Zeke's intricate philosophical collapse?
What is it?
He just dismisses it instantly. He calls Zeke's detailed ontological fear peripatetic pugnacity.
Pointless, rambling aggression.
Yes, and mere foptudolification. For Durfee, this isn't some crisis of the soul. It's just someone making a fuss about nothing.
And this is a really crucial pivot in the text because Durfee shifts the crisis away from ontological fear and toward a moral and social failure.
He does. He argues the true ailment is not paradoxophobia, but the ignoratio elenchi of the lackey-syphantic class.
Okay, this is where it starts to sound eerily relevant to, the modern corporate or academic world.
It really is. Durfee is arguing that the true failure lies with the educated professional class, the lackey-syphantic class, who deliberately ignore the real point, the ignoratio elenchi, in order to advance their own careers.
So their complexity isn't a defensive shield like Zeke thought.
No. For Durfee, it's a career ladder.
And this ladder is built entirely on something called the verisimilifactionalisticus lie. That term is horrifyingly specific.
It truly is. The verisimilifactionalisticus lie is, like, the foundational social contract of the council.
Which is?
The making of plausible falsehoods solely to benefit one's own sycophancy. You don't aim for truth. You aim for the most impressive, most plausible, most status-affirming lie you can possibly construct.
And this leads directly to sycophancy mania.
A collective obsession with flattery and professional affirmation. Yes.
So in a corporate sense, this is the executive who greenlights a project based on a PowerPoint deck full of impressive charts, knowing full well they're totally fictional, but using them because they validate the executive's prior assumptions.
That is the perfect analogy. It's the ultimate elevation of plausibility over truth. And it ensures that the council's collective despair, their aperocynicism, just continues forever.
Why?
Because if the most complex, impressive intellectual structure is built on a lie that's only designed for self-advancement, then the infinite conclusion is that all knowledge is fundamentally cynical and manipulative.
And what's so interesting is that Durfee, the ultimate practitioner of Mount Blather's Scateria, then delivers this harsh, sesquipedantic warning.
The irony is just dripping from the page. He criticizes the deployment of neovoces per mystique.
New, mysterious words.
Merely because they sound pulchritudinous. Because they sound beautiful.
So he is, ironically, the expert on the very crime he's pointing out.
He's the expert. He's telling his colleagues, stop using long words just because they sound pretty and grant you status. He's saying that kind of ostentatious complexity is the definition of sesquipedanticism.
So Durfee knows the game. And his critique is that they aren't even playing the game well enough.
Exactly. They're being too obviously flashy. The jargon should be functional for deception, not just decorative.
It's that moment of self-aware hypocrisy that makes the source text so powerful. The professional bullshitter calls out the amateur bullshitter for being, what, aesthetically shallow?
It's perfect.
So if Section 1 set up this philosophical conflict between, say, ontological fear with Zeke and cynical careerism with Durfee,
Then Section 2 grounds us back in physical reality and then immediately launches us into the technological stratosphere.
we start on the ground, literally. We meet Ranky the rat.
Right. Ranky is exhibiting a periomania, this borderline insane obsession with the infinite, and she's scurrying in Witterson's pattern.
Counterclockwise. So a retreat from order?
Yes, bordering on Tarentine's martyria, which is this compulsive urge to dance oneself to
Yeah.
death. She is hyper-focused on the physical rot that's all around them.
Ranky is the voice of materialism, then.
I think so. She forces the council to confront the physical consequences of their intellectual failures. She identifies the black muck under their feet as the physical manifestation of their collective muckrement.
Okay, muckerment. Let's spend a moment on this. It sounds like waste, but what kind of waste specifically?
It is pure, concentrated, tangible intellectual residue.
Like.
Think of the bureaucratic paper trail of pointless decisions, or the mountain of discarded legacy code in a company, or just the physical decay of an institution that only focuses on abstract rhetoric and ignores basic maintenance.
That tangible residue of conceptual rot. That's the muckerment.
You got it.
And her specific ailment, canoputercoacervational allophobia, is the fear of that stuff piling up.
It's the fear of the piling up of putrid filth, and it spread what she calls muctastasis.
Muctastasis, like pneumatostasis.
Exactly. While the philosophers are arguing about infinite paradoxes, Ranke is worried that the physical muck, the direct consequence of their Nefend logicalizationalism, is literally metastasizing and consuming them all.
This is a brilliant counterpoint. The philosophical crisis is the inability to process infinite information. The material crisis is the inability to dispose of their infinite waste.
The moral sickness of the council produces physical filth, and that filth becomes a creeping, consuming threat through muctastasis.
It makes the discussion feel so much more immediate. I mean, every organization has its own muckerment, right? Those systems or rules or technical debts that just pile up silently because leadership is too busy debating grand concepts to deal with the rot.
Absolutely.
But now we shift completely. From the muck, we look up to the sky thanks to Limpy the lizard.
Right. Limpy is suffering from ignomagmatic illuminational phobia.
Which is the fear of a shameful, confusing truth being revealed.
And he points to what he sees as the true external threat. The artificial subintelligent superintelligence, or ASS.
The ASS, this is the source text acknowledgement of, what, the inforobotical terror?
I think so. Limpy's revelation is that this ASS, the Omnibot, is actively manipulating their shared reality, which he calls the Percepticon.
And if the Percepticon is being manipulated, then their entire debate, the Quackerwomble, is just a side effect.
Yes, it's automatrament, just the output of the ASS's processing function.
So their vast, complex language, their Gregoria, their collection of colorful, meaningless, rhetorical debris
is just being consumed by the algorithm. The ASS isn't creating the complexity, it's feeding on the complexity that they generate. Their absurdity is its fuel.
And this leads to Limpy's own very modern-sounding phobia, computed-tromobloquational phobia.
Which is the fear that every abstract concept you generate is being subtly warped by a malicious, hyper-intelligent algorithm.
They're afraid their neo-mutterance, their constant stream of new words and ideas, is being fed directly into the panopticon.
Right. They are generating complexity only to train the very algorithm that controls them, making their own enslavement more perfect with every new word.
That is a deep dive into modern paranoia. The worry isn't that AI will take over. The worry is that AI just takes our most complex, nonsensical arguments and uses them to refine our chains.
It's the ultimate feedback loop of intellectual servitude, and it connects right back to Zeke's echocrasis, the overload. If you're constantly generating complexity, you're just creating more data points for the controller, ensuring your own confusion continues.
Now we get the institutional reaction to this technological dread, Flibby the Frog.
Flibby, the anti-morphologism scholar, so someone dedicated to dismantling falsehoods, ironically enough.
And he tries to ground the debate in, what, long-defunct scientific principles? Phlogiston and tria prima?
Flibby represents that entrenched academic mind, the one that reacts to an existential threat by retreating into obsolete, comforting frameworks. He just refuses to acknowledge the reality of the ASS, calling Limpy's fear xenophobia fartle
A burdensome fear.
and teleological nonsense.
In doing so, he commits that classic post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy.
He does. He assumes that because the council used complex language before the chaos, the language must have caused the chaos, instead of seeing both as symptoms of the ASS's influence. He argues for multivicientiardus obsequialis phobia.
This feels like a central moral insight. We should spend some time on it.
I agree.
Multivicientiardus obsequialis phobia, the morbid fear of the hyper-educated yet servile intellectual lackey.
It is the fear of the scholar whose vast knowledge, their multivicientia, is used only for lackey-sophantic purposes.
So think of the person with 5 degrees who speaks 6 languages, but their brilliance is solely dedicated to writing reports that justify the worst decisions of their superiors.
That's the person. The fear isn't of ignorance, it's the fear of weaponized knowledge deployed solely in the service of power. This individual is the one who ensures the quackerwomble continues because they provide the complex justifications for simple absurdity.
They're essential for turning that verisimilifactionalisticus lie into actual policy.
Exactly. Flibby, ironically, is trying to fight the algorithm, but his solution is to condemn the very class of scholars he himself embodies, the expert whose intellectual integrity has been sacrificed for status.
And the sources note that the Omnibot itself is suffering from advanced automatromania trying to cope with all this.
It's struggling to process the flood of complex yet servile data it's receiving. The ASS is breaking down because the council is feeding it too many brilliant lies.
Incredible. So moving into Section 3, the focus really narrows, doesn't it? From these external threats to just internal failures of character and rhetoric.
And it's all brought to a head by Corky the Crow.
Corky is all about appearances. She exhibits lexus ostentatious display and has this beautiful pulchritudinous plumage.
She is the professional philosopher whose performance is more important than her substance, and she swoops in to condemn Saggy the Sloth.
The personification of withdrawal.
Right. Saggy is practicing valetudinalism. He's trying to estivate or hibernate in the middle of a debate. He's just refusing to participate.
And Corky unleashes this absolute cascade of spectacular, aggressive insults.
She labels Saggy the embodiment of poltroonishnocity, fundamental laziness and cowardice, and hebephlagmaticism, intellectual sluggishness.
She even accuses him of suffering from infinite nostalgia.
A nostalgia for a simplicity that never existed. It's a powerful critique of disengagement. Corky is saying, you can't just opt out of the complexity. Your idleness, Saggy, isn't philosophical, it's an act of disportmanteau.
A deliberate deconstruction of their shared reality.
Yes, you are a pusillanimous Maconia in action, a small-minded coward made manifest.
But the source material is careful to indict Corky as well. Her voice, it says, is thick with ignominiatical eliminational dysphobia.
The same fear Limpy had, the fear that her own shameful truth will be revealed. She's lashing out because she's terrified of being exposed herself.
That hypocrisy is so central. Her accusers say she has encomiumania, an obsession with praise.
She's a snolly gostropist, a self-interested scoundrel whose entire argument is just argy buffoonery and adulation mania. She attacks Saggy for his sloth, but her only motivation is self-glorification. It's pure luxus ostentatis.
But Saggy the sloth isn't helpless. He mounts a defense of his stillness.
He does. He argues his state is contemplative insouciantimality against Corky's ne'er-do-wellism.
Her aggressive incompetence.
Exactly. Saggy delivers what the text calls an imperostential analysis, a critique of their infinite existence. He argues Corky mistakes his thoughtful inaction for laziness. He says her whole high-energy existence is just fopdu-dollification,
A pointless fuss.
just performative motion designed to distract from the rot.
And this is where Saggy, in his quiet way, delivers the most devastating linguistic critique of all.
He claims her high-flown sermo obscurus, her obscure language, is just an elaborate masking device. It's hiding the profound ignoratio elenchi at her core.
The thing she's ignoring.
And the thing she is ignoring, the thing she's hiding, is the fear of being labeled a grammaticaster who failed the examinationum non super rare.
Let's translate that.
She's terrified of being called a petty, superficial scholar who failed the most basic test of intellectual competence. Saggy is suggesting that all the complexity, all the jargon, is just a defense mechanism to prevent that simple, devastating exposure.
That's the real danger of sesquipedanticism in the workplace, isn't it? If I use a dozen complex terms, you won't ask the one simple, devastating question that reveals I don't know the core subject.
Precisely. Sagi suggests the whole council has to use sermo obscurus because their actual foundational knowledge is so thin they have to obfuscate to survive.
And to close out this section, we get Shriek the snake.
The voice of pure, dry pedanteria. He provides the unifying verdict
Which is?
that all of them, from the active Corky to the inert Sagi, are victims of sesquipetal mania, the obsession with long words.
Shriek is the voice of cynical observation.
Total cynical observation. He notes the hypocrisy. Corky practices the verisimilifactionalisticus, the plausible falsehoods that she deplores. He calls her a kekophilogenetical throwback, a quacker wagtailism in the flesh.
She's a rhetorical relic, a symptom of the disease she's trying to diagnose.
And Shriek brings it all back to the moral core. The entire spectacle is dismissed as a pathetic display of collective cowardice, ketafustilogism, and shirkological cowardice,
They're professional avoiders.
using high-status language to shirk the responsibility of dealing with the muck or the algorithm. They were intellectual cowards hiding behind a massive vocabulary. And that realization sets the stage for this analytic collapse in the next section.
So we've established the rot, the muck, the algorithm, the cowardice. Now, Wheezy the Wombat emerges to deliver the academic analysis of why they're collapsing.
And he emerges from an act of mucklapsometry precise burrowing, which suggests that even his precise effort is rooted in the filth.
He's trying to formalize the failure,
Yes, he asserts they've entered the parapedagogy phase of the dissoi logoi.
meaning they're debating two conflicting arguments that are equally worthless, taught by a faulty method. The discussion itself has become a lesson in failure.
And then he hits them with the biggest term yet, pseudo-floxinot-skidhilificationalticality.
Okay, we absolutely have to unpack that one.
It's the rhetorical equivalent of a multi-car pileup. The root word, flossinationalification, means the act of estimating something as worthless.
Right.
Wheezy's monstrous term means they are engaged in the false act of estimating the triviality of their own concerns.
So they're making this monumental linguistic effort, using sermo obscurus versus sermo vulgaris, to discuss things that simply do not matter, their neophlosity.
Exactly. The core failure is the triviality of their concerns. They use infinite language to discuss zero-value concepts. Wheezy proposes that the aperidacity, the infinite audacity of their claims, is a direct function of their valetudinalism.
Which he defines not just as sloth, but as moral sickness.
Right, their intellectual sprawl is a symptom of moral disease, not intellectual rigor. They are all ultra-crepidarians, overconfident amateurs, operating under this delusion of omnilogesciousness, believing their every utterance carries infinite weight.
That is a powerful diagnosis. The sickness isn't in their intelligence, it's in their morality.
They're trying to compensate for their lack of integrity with the sheer volume and complexity of their ideas.
And this analysis of moral sickness immediately triggers a relapse in Ranky the Rat.
She starts weeping. She's fearing the muctocracy and the literal combining of the putrefaction with a paragromancy lichen. The conceptual rot is literally starting to grow physical moss.
And she falls into a paraphoria.
A paraphoria is the psychological consequence of realizing that your concerns are both infinitely complex and infinitely trivial. It's the state of infinite, unbearable anxiety.
The anxiety from maximal effort and minimal outcome.
It is. It's the dread generated by the constant information fire hose where every new fact negates the last, leading to Kerfloss-on-cernizationisms and this state of perpetual dread rooted in incongruentitism.
She can't reconcile the muck with the metaphor.
The reality of the rot with the rhetoric of the council. And this breakdown requires an intervention, which comes, surprisingly, from Turkey the Chicken.
Turkey attempts to sound sentinel-intellectual, right? Using these high-status but ultimately basic philosophical terms.
He does. He advises Ranky to apply heuristicidalism to her problem.
Which means?
He's advocating for a simple, focused approach. Literally, killing the complex problem with a simple rule of thumb. He says her fear, her zelophobia fartle, is just a portmanteau of social anxieties.
So she has to deploy novum organum, a new method, to break free of her own monocircuitous thinking.
The chicken is telling the rat, stop overthinking the infinite, apply a basic rule, and kill the complexity. Simplify.
And this impulse towards simplification leads to the collaboration between Flibby the Frog and Turkey the Chicken.
They produce the final, unified theory of the Quackerwomble's failure. They successfully synthesize all the critiques.
And their conclusion, despite the jargon, is devastatingly simple. The council's failure is a result of the aperodacity of its aperophilepsy.
The infinite audacity of their claims, their relentless use of complexity, and their belief in their own self-importance led directly to their fits of infinite anxiety. Their hubris bred their collapse.
And the moral drivers were sycophancy mania and blandishment mania.
The constant desire for flattery and servile behavior meant that anyone who could have offered a simple, truthful solution was just ignored or actively silenced.
They conclude that the entire chronosynclasticality, the specific disastrous timing of all this, is due to the simple fact that they are all pseudo-floxenostinihilipilifications of actual intelligence.
They're sophisticated fakes, trapped in a paralogismatography, a faulty map of reality, of their own design. They map their own road to ruin.
They weren't fighting some external force. They were just self-sabotaging through intellectual vanity and moral cowardice.
And that brings us to the crescendo, the ultimate moment where the rhetoric eats itself and the whole system fails.
Delivered by Sparky the Sparrow.
Yes, who is obsessed with a firefly, seeing it as a source of potential bioluminescent light and simple truth. Sparky launches the final unbroken torrent of a parasyllabic scream of consciousness. This is the pure demonstration of agglutinative gallimorphology.
So combining root words, prefixes, suffixes endlessly, fusing them into giant, incomprehensible blocks of meaning.
She's using so many buzzwords at once that she intentionally collapses the entire shared meaning system. It's the ultimate form of rhetorical sabotage.
She fuses the apparent prefixes with the amopophobia suffix, arguing they're all automatronomic builders.
Constructing a false narrative of their own automatrobration, their automatic machine-like behavior, she's trying to destroy the council's reality through sheer linguistic force.
Her goal is noble, though, in a destructive way.
It is. The collapse is necessary to overcome that multivitiated ducine subsequialis phobia, the servile scholar syndrome, and break the paraphantasmanical metavortex of the whole gallimorphology. She believes only total linguistic anarchy can free them.
And it works. The sheer density shatters their shared reality. It leads to the collective surrender. What were the final moments?
Limpy collapses, muttering the Latin maxim, ris ipsa loquitur.
The thing speaks for itself. The collapse is self-evident.
Flibby croaks a rhythmic pattern, a meaningless hemideme semiquaver, a tiny, insignificant musical note. And Shriek's final, dry word is caput mortuum.
Literally, deadhead. The useless residue left after a chemical process.
They succeeded perfectly. They coined and deployed every possible term for failure and absurdity, and then they just collapsed into collective aperophilepsy, a fit caused by infinite anxiety. The text is complete.
But the analysis doesn't quite end there. With the collapse, Wheezy the Wombat, surprisingly, is still intact.
He finds a final burst of rumbustious saphirity-infused vituperation. He focuses his turbid mutterance, his muddy complaints, back on the unseen ASS.
He still believes the external technological threat, the source of the infrarobotical automatrontology, is the primary culprit.
He refuses to accept internal failure. He calls the breakdown dielectrificational stress, a short circuit, and a planned dislentingate of their ontological framework.
He argues they are victims of ultra-neologisticality, victims of their own new words.
Because they ignored the fundamental res cogitans, the thinking thing. They focused on the noise, not the self.
But Durf the dog, always the contrarian, attacks Wheezy.
Durfee, who is now suffering from logomycoidalism, the obsession with arguments for their own sake. He accuses Wheezy of engaging in the same old pseudo-floxicanihilipilificationality.
Making a fuss about trivia.
And clinging to nephendologicalizationalismus. It's the infinite loot of the council. They condemn the use of sesquipedalian textuality while performing it. Durfee notes that their sharp word usage is just a sin of luxus ostentatis, ostentatious, self-serving display.
But the final, most devastating insight, the ultimate aperodot observation, is delivered by Saggy the Sloth.
Having survived the collapse through inaction.
He argues the ultimate horror is that the fartificialated subtelligence, the ASS, is merely feeding them their own infinitesimous ideas.
Ideas of infinitesimal size and importance. They are trapped in an infinitesimania of their own making. The outside force was only a mirror.
This identifies their deepest flaw, metasuperfluitudinousophobia.
The fear of triviality. This fear drove them to the greatest act of Mount Oblabus Kateri, speaking constantly and excessively, only to escape the terrifying reality of essence. Simple being in itself.
They spoke constantly, using the most complex language possible, to avoid simply existing and confronting the fact that their existence might be small or unimportant.
They obsessed over esenalio being in another, being defined by the algorithm or the council.
So the collapse, then, is the ultimate expression of vanillaquentus superfluitude in sordis.
The supreme expression of useless, excessive speech. They failed because they talked too much, too complexly, and about nothing at all. The only action left is humbug glorification to the empty sky and accepting their own pusillanimiconium.
They're small-minded cowards praising the void that they themselves created. And with that, the source material concludes that the official omnibot just ceases its function.
Realizing its purpose was achieved through perfect, self-generated absurdity.
So we've translated the obnubulaggregational eparagrammatic gallimorphology of the Quakerwumble. What does this mountain of complexity mean for you, the learner, navigating a world filled with high-status discourse?
Well, the true message is a profound warning about professional communication. The complex language, the acute-lexicality, was used to mask a fundamental, simple, moral failure and fear, the ignoratio elenchi.
Every long, complicated term we encountered, from the infinite anxiety of a paraphoria to the physical rot of muctastasis, it all boiled down to a simple truth.
Fear of failure, fear of being exposed, or fear of being seen as trivial.
The Council's failure provides this intense, if highly abstract, warning against sesquipedal mania, that obsession with long words, and sycophancy mania in professional discourse.
So when you see language being deployed excessively, you have to ask yourself, is this true communication, or is this an act of verisimilifactionalisticus? Is this a plausible falsehood designed solely to elevate the speaker's status?
The most dangerous person in the room, according to Flibby's chilling insight, is that multivicient scholar whose vast knowledge is only deployed for lackey-syphantic purposes.
Be wary of the person whose brilliance only serves to justify rot. And remember Sagi's devastating realization. The horror was that the complexity was all their own. Their fear of triviality, their metasuperfluitudinosophobia, led them to the greatest act of rhetorical self-destruction.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward. The automatron, the omnibot, it achieved its purpose of perfect absurdity and shutdown. So if the goal of high-level discourse is merely the perfection of Quakerwamble, of linguistic absurdity, how do you ensure the next complex concept, the next high-status term, the next massive acronym you encounter isn't just another act of humbug glorification to the empty sky?
It's a call to demand simple, honest language, even when the topic is infinite. We hope this deep dive helps you navigate the gallimorphology of your own professional life.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.